Sorry. Sorting it out. Good luck. Fuck. This is Star Wars. This is a Star Wars video. This is a Star Wars video. This is a Star Wars video. Nope, it's never not weird. Is the internet saturated with videos talking about Star Wars? Absolutely. Not a question. But I don't know, talking about Star Wars is fun, right? I want to try something a little bit different, though. Instead of talking about a specific moment or a specific movie, I want to talk about it all. All of it. It's Star Wars. If the eye line, like if I'm looking off camera, weirdly it's because I got a little teleprompter laptop set up. In this video, I'll be talking about every single Star Wars movie in chronological order and one great scene from each of them. I'd like to focus more on the directing side of things, and I know good directing is a bit of a broad thing to talk about, both because it's a matter of taste and good filmmaking doesn't just come down to good directing. A scene can come across as well directed just because the editor, the DP, or the composer decided to go extra hard on a certain moment. But I'm calling it directing for the simplicity of the video title, alright? So yeah, it is more filmmaking than just directing, but saying best directed scene sounds better in a title. And if I get sidetracked along the way talking about the writing, don't be surprised. And also, this doesn't mean these are the best scenes in these given movies. They're just the ones that best fit this video when I was writing this, and there were some that I was going to talk about that got swapped out, because those are going to be in another video that I'll make later this year, but that's like weeks away. Honestly, the whole concept for this video just seems a lot more flawed and loose the more I talk about it, so these are just excuses to talk about these scenes, alright? I've selected a scene from the lightsaber duel. Shocker. I'm not talking about the fight as a whole here, I'm just gonna skip to the end to this moment. That part where it's just Qui-Gon and Maul and Obi-Wan's over there behind the weird shield thing that's there for some reason. No clue why it's there, but it works for dramatic effect. This is a scene of Qui-Gon's demise. I like this scene a lot for a few reasons. Everyone knew Qui-Gon was gonna die. I assume. I wasn't there in 1999, but like, he's not in the original trilogy, he's never mentioned, he's dead. And I think Lucas could understand that the audience saw this death coming, so he doesn't exactly try to hide it here. Obi-Wan has been separated from the fight and he can just watch as it goes down. And once they become separated, Qui-Gon's fate is made immediately clear. Maul's attacks continue getting faster, the editing picks up the pace, we get these weird whispers, Obi-Wan shows obvious dread, and then death. I love the detail that Qui-Gon maintains his composure throughout the fight. He never skips a beat, but he's clearly at the disadvantage, and then the inevitable happens. That fantastic swallow the score in a very Star Wars no. I'm not gonna shout no. This isn't a super complicated scene, but I love how it plays into a very obvious feeling of inevitability, and on a character level, I love how Qui-Gon is seemingly aware of his defeat, but he remains calm and control of his actions. It just gives a small feeling that he could potentially prevail, but no, he doesn't. He dies, actually. And bonus points that Maul defeats him through simply outclassing him at dueling, no tricks, no dark side magic, he just simply got beat, and that adds tension to when it's just him and Obi-Wan fighting. Really cool scene, the section was brief, but admittedly, Attack of the Clones is the least interesting movie to me. I don't know why I was just leaning there. It's the most least interesting movie to me in terms of filmmaking, and that's not to say it's bad, it's just that its strengths come from the ideas in the script as well as the score. Like, a lot of it's the score. So I'm going with more of a sequence here rather than a single scene. The ending. No, not like a, the best part was when it ended type of joke. But no, I mean like the fantastic final ending sequence. I'm just gonna hold on to this pencil. I don't know what to do with my hands right now. The orange color palette dominates the scene. It feels like the quiet ending of an era. Yoda's ominous dialogue about the threshold they've just crossed.
Begun. The Clone War has.
Cutting to the birth of what will become the Galactic Empire, and then cutting from that to the marriage between Anakin and Padme. The score is insane. I think John Williams is insanely in tune with the emotions of the story. Like, all the time, to the point where no matter what it is, the music is constantly elevating whatever is happening at any point in these movies. And I think all three of the prequels is him acting at his absolute best. He's not an actor, he's a composer, you know what I mean. It's that build-up in the council chamber scene that builds through the first shot of the Empire, and then it swells into the Imperial March, and then that just swerves straight into the love theme. It lends so much dramatic weight to this moment, I cannot praise it enough. The lost confusion of the Jedi, the creation of the army, and the wedding between Anakin and Padme all vary in emotion and meaning in the moment, but we as the audience know they're all leading to the same place. Even just that simple shot of Padme taking Anakin's robotic hand, a shot that feels completely separated from the serene Naboo landscape, is a great representation of the story on its own. The whole thing is just one of the most well-done moments in the whole saga. Revenge of the Sith is the first movie here I've had a hard time picking just one scene. There's a few strong contenders: Obi-Wan's last interaction with Anakin, the opera scene, the long stare between Anakin and Padme. All those are great, but like, we know they're great, so much so I don't feel like writing a whole paragraph here because it would feel redundant. So I'm going with another sequence, one that's kind of a companion piece to that Attack of the Clones ending. It's the part where it's cutting between the death of democracy, Obi-Wan and Yoda's visit to the Jedi Temple post-massacre, and the extermination of the remaining separatists. This is the reality that the ending of Attack of the Clones has led to. Where that was a contrasted series of emotions that varied in meaning in the moment, this is the tragedy they've all created together. The choice to intercut these three moments specifically is just brilliant. Obi-Wan asking who could have done this and then immediately cutting to this, it gets me every time. And the score too, fucking John fucking Williams, man. I don't know where it stands in the discourse nowadays, but I remember when I was younger I used to see the "so this is how liberty dies" with thunderous applause line get made fun of a lot on the internet. Like, one, it's great. It's pretty much what the whole movie is about, so elevating that into the direct text of the movie, like, I know show don't tell, we're showing it, it's important to have there. Secondly, George Lucas's decision to tell a story about the manipulation and fall of democracy on such a large mainstream level is very admirable, and a risk that blockbusters pretty much never take. Like, people came to these movies for a fun space adventure and they got this, and I think that's really cool. Regardless of the general execution of it throughout the whole trilogy, I think this one moment culminates it and pays it off all so well. Palpatine did not create the Empire with a military takeover or with dark side magic. He did it by manipulating the system and its politicians to the point where they applaud him and his blatantly illegal takeover. And as that's happening, we're seeing the horror of Vader and its fallout. All of it Palpatine's orchestration. And I think his takeover is portrayed in a way that's not only great here in this movie, but it's done so well that it adds an extra strength and nuance to the whole story that's now at the root of this whole franchise. Something that I feel when watching later chronological entries. Honestly, the prequels are not my favorite, but they get to this point sometimes where you can just feel Lucas really getting into it, and all the disparate elements come together and they pop, and it's just pure magic. Something that no other blockbuster franchise has really captured to this point. Maybe that's my bias for Star Wars, maybe that's just because this was a completely creator-driven trilogy, I don't know. Maybe a bit of both. Okay, this is a tangent now, but I'm into it. I think at its best, Revenge of the Sith taps into that special something that Star Wars has. It's that tragedy, history, inevitability, and hope, something that even though stylistically and thematically the saga can vary different between entries, I still feel like they all pull from and intertwine with each other, sometimes subtly, sometimes overtly, but it just creates something completely holistic. And it's a very specific magic that only exists in this franchise and simply doesn't exist elsewhere. And I know I'm biased in saying that because I've been into this series for literally as long as I can remember, but I think something has to be there in the first place in order for so many people to get into a franchise in that way. Like, I'm pretty sure it's not just me. And it's definitely disingenuous to say that it's just people's personal bias because they grew up with these movies. Like, they're fucking good movies, dude. Did I just get off topic? Yes, I barely talked about the filmmaking here, but I think the mere fact that the scene exists in the way that it does speaks to the intentional direction of the film's narrative as a whole. Well, going from that tangent to Solo is a bit of a tone shift. Solo is fun. I like Solo a lot, and I think the story that it tells is really nice and underappreciated, but there's not really a single moment where all of its strengths are distilled into one great moment, you know? It's more about the fun and the adventure as a whole rather than, bringing it to one big dramatic conclusion. Let's just talk about this sequence towards the end. I know I keep picking big third act stuff for these, but that's where the fun stuff always is. I'm just realizing that me constantly shaking this pencil around will probably look incredibly annoying once this is blown up on a big screen. I can only see this on a small monitor right now, cut me some slack. The Beckett treachery is super predictable, but it's perfectly cromulent to its narrative function. And this whole bit is just good fun. I love how it devolves into a complete free-for-all once Beckett betrays Dryden. The sliding around on the floors, diving for cover. I love the way the scene is shot. The coverage is appropriate. It's clear the focal length choice, central framing of the characters, and just the fact that it lets the action breathe for a little bit. It gives you a full understanding and feeling for the room and its geography. It takes great advantage of its characters. The extra bits of banter feel appropriate and they add to the scene rather than feeling like a distraction.
I was just thinking, why don't we join forces and go get Beckett together?
That is a great idea. Let's do it. You go first.
Oh, Han.
and it comes to an effective, if slightly predictable, culmination. I think Kira and Han's relationship and its implications on his character is handled really well. Kira betraying Dryden for Han is predictable, but its sincerity to her character makes her later turn more effective. And I like that it shows that she's willing to betray him, but taking him out of the equation is not enough to undo her feeling of obligation and entrapment to that life. It's really cool. Her believed obligation is what I mean. I don't know if I actually said that. Like, it's not real. She's dumb for it. Rogue One is not my favorite Star Wars, but I quite like the space it occupies in the larger story. I honestly prefer Solo as a movie, but going straight to Rogue One after Revenge of the Sith feels more appropriate because of the way it complements that movie is really narratively interesting. A movie which is insanely tragic and its very overt commentary. You go from democracy and a hero meeting a miserable and orchestrated end to a movie that is miserable. It fits. Or at least it portrays a very miserable and oppressive world. It's not like the most miserable movie. This isn't come and see in Star Wars, like it's still fun, but you know what I mean. And Solo isn't devoid of this, but it's a much more prominent and essential facet to Rogue One. You go from Jedi heroics and moralistic politicians to Imperial banners flying everywhere and the completion of a weapon that can wipe out whole planets. It's the unforgiving world created by the Sith's revenge. The scene I want to talk about is when we first see the destructive potential of this Death Star, this mining accident. Honestly, how amazing is it that they chose to intercut the first strike of the Death Star with what is unquestionably the best emotional beat in the whole movie? As Jin's father explains what he's done, how he loves her, and how he's planted the seeds for the Death Star's downfall.
Think of where you are. For Stardust.
We are seeing in real time the first showcase of its power. Or to be thematically appropriate to The Empire Strikes Back, its destruction, not its power. It's the most elegantly put together scene in the whole movie. Maybe. I don't know. Some of those action scenes were good. It's a great scene. And the added knowledge of Jedha's connection to the Jedi's history being wiped clean by this weapon adds an extra haunting nuance to the scene. Gareth Edwards might be the best in the business when it comes to utilizing the scale that blockbusters allow. And I mean scale in terms of like visuals. The portrayal of the Death Star, the Star Destroyers, the destruction, the sheer daunting size in their compositions adds a lot to the whole movie that really helps sell it. What a movie. 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 Heck of a movie. God damn, this movie. What a movie. Alright, this is a reshoot. The rest of this video was recorded back in February. This is June now. The original recording I had for this segment mostly just came out like a bunch of gibberish, and then I started talking about like bones or something. Some really well thought out meat. This inclusion's weird. I was gonna say it's like, oh, the bones are good, but it doesn't really make sense because it's more than... I'm saying that picking a scene for A New Hope is similar to my Solo issue, where it's more about like the whole of the adventure rather than one defining moment. Other than the binary sunset, which is probably like the defining moment in all of these movies, but we all know it like the back of our hands. So, Trench Run. What a great sequence, and a technical marvel at that. Besides the camera having actual weight to it and the practical sets getting to use real lighting instead of simulated lighting, the restricted movements of the models make them feel actually heavy and like they have weight to it. They don't feel like they can do these crazy maneuvers or spins or anything too fancy to get out of a sticky situation. There's actual weight and tension to their movements, and all the practical structures on the Death Star whizzing by the camera help maintain a feeling of speed so it doesn't just feel like a bunch of slow stuff happening. A lot of what makes the scene work dramatically simply comes down to just how tight and precise the editing is. There's not a single shot or cut out of place, and the scene flows and builds dramatically so perfectly. There's really no point to me just sitting here explaining shot per shot why the scene works in a video like this, because it's so much better just to be felt and watched. It's really just so immaculate as an action sequence. And part of what makes it so amazing is if you take away all of the insane practical work that they did on the effects, storytelling-wise, it's following a very straightforward and traditional principle of action filmmaking. Or principles, there's more than one. Hollywood hates them. Learn this one principle for perfect action filmmaking. Doctors hate them. The ticking clock, the first attempt fails, the big bad guy gets involved. It's all clear and efficient raising of the stakes. Luke trusting in the Force and Han saving the day are both pretty straightforward payoffs narratively, but they feel like the greatest thing in the world because it's using perfectly measured inclusions of time-tested storytelling principles with this absolute blender of genre and aesthetic tropes and ideas and game-changing effects work. It's why A New Hope was the huge success that it was. The constant allusions to lore and history history and the concept of the Force, as well as the visual aesthetics, feel like they all truly elevate the movie, because the character arcs in the story feel so confident with where they're going and what they're doing. Like a pinch of salt activating the flavor of a recipe. Did I really write that? And look, I'm not into the idea of dogmatically sticking to traditional story structures and standard setup payoff narratives. Like, typically my favorite movies are ones that give no mind to conventional structure, but do they work? Yes. And A New Hope is what happens when some really talented and passionate people inject so many great ideas and pure imagination into them and also have a few $1,000,000 to play with. Ah yes, objectively secure convention. The lifeblood of Star Wars. Wait a minute. I will restrain myself from talking about just how daring and sharp... The Empire Strikes Back was. Like, yeah, especially for its time, but even now. Like, we all know, right? I hope so. You better fucking think it's a masterpiece. I think it's cool how the shark gets all burnt up in Jaws 2, but was that movie actively expanding and redefining the audience's relationship with that world? No. Luke's confrontation with Vader. This whole fight between them is incredible. I could talk about the final bit, the absolute perfect rhythm in the shots, the cuts, the choreography. The official pick is Luke's arrival at the carbonite chamber. Leading up to this point, we've seen a more intense portrayal of Vader compared to the last movie. Throughout this movie, it's been moodier, trust has been broken, Yoda deceived the audience's expectations, the knowledge of the Force has been redefined. Or not so much redefined, more so is completely expanded, and it's redefined Luke's relationship with it. The world he stepped into feels larger than ever. The cave sequence, Obi-Wan and Yoda's warnings against Luke traveling to the city in the clouds to save his friends. It all works to fill this scene with uncertainty and unease. And then the atmosphere of the location itself, we have these harsh shadows, all this smoke and fog, harsh orange lights, Vader stands in the shadows like a devil. Okay, like, the Carbonite Chamber might be my favorite movie set ever, like, it's so good. The subtle staging choice of making Luke approach and climb up the steps to meet Vader is smart for both visual and pacing reasons. The shot choices are so precise that the cinematography feels almost invisible. Invisible as in when I'm watching the scene, I'm not thinking about, oh, that looks nice, I'm just thinking about the scene itself. I'm thinking about Luke and Vader and their presence in the scene and what the story is rather than, oh, this shot looks good, 4 pictures in a tweet. Because the information and tone of the shots are all in perfect sequence, it's not about the craft, it's about the moment. I'm talking about the craft, though. Once they're standing across from each other, it plays between a medium shot and tight close-ups. Luke becoming a silhouette along with Vader plays into the unease of the situation. What extent of Vader's power will he use? Is Luke out of his depth? Does he know he's out of his depth? How far has he actually come as a Jedi? When they actually start fighting, Luke pushes on the offensive, and it's clear Vader's simply observing and testing him. I love the little light, timid pans that the camera does as Luke is trying to back Vader up and gain more ground. I'm cutting myself off here for the sake of time, like I could talk all about what goes on. I just pointed to it like it's down there. But what happens when they go down to that part with the actual carbonite freezer? I don't want to be here all day. But this video will probably already be way too long. Irvin Kershner might not be the most famous name when it comes to film directing, but his attention to detail and care for this movie is often taken for granted, and it's a pretty big deal, all things considered. Masterpiece movie, 6 out of 10. It's a scene in the throne room. Return of the Jedi isn't a perfect movie, but everything in there is. Which, considering it's the most important part of the whole thing, I'd say is pretty okay. Like, everything else is just gravy at this point. And of course I'm going with the final portion of this sequence. The simple shot of Luke half in the shadows, conflict swirling around as Vader's creeping around taunting him. It's one of my favorite shots in the whole franchise, and Mark Hamill's performance as Luke in these movies is just so dang sincere. And then Vader pushes him one bit too far by bringing Leia into it.
If you will not turn to the dark side, then perhaps she will.
And, you know, he goes crazy. Any pretense of restraint or control is pulled away as Luke completely loses it. I love how after Luke's lunge and Vader's reaction, we pull away into a wide shot. It plays well for clarity, but more importantly, we're briefly pulled away from Luke's subjective perspective. We're no longer with him in his outbursts, we're watching what he's becoming. And besides that, just the clear image, the red and green lightsabers, the silhouetted figures, and, you know, the music too, it all feels so mythical and like the perfect culmination of these 3 movies. Hell, even going from Phantom Menace to this, it's perfect no matter what. Adding the sequels, it's still perfect, believe it or not. Just the imagery of Luke beating Vader back really drives home how far the story has come. And as it goes on, we're pushed back into more subjective perspectives. We have these closer shots, and there's this amazing shot looking down which plays to a similar effect as the earlier wide shot, but also feels like it echoes this shot from Empire Strikes Back. And of course, the scene culminates with Luke beating Vader down with these really shaky, tight close-ups, and then him seeing the connection with their robotic hands. It's just perfect visual storytelling. Without going in deeper into like arcs and stuff, I love how Luke's realization of what he could become by seeing his connection with Vader through their robotic hands, it's just conveyed so well. The compositions of the shots, the editing, and Mark Hamill's facial expression, it tells you everything you need to know. Like the more literal destination of the cave scene from Empire. Honestly, I could just go on about this scene for an hour. Somebody stop me. You're in sequel trilogy territory now. I made a video on The Force Awakens like a year and a half ago. I haven't watched that video since I made it, but from what I remember what was said in it, I mostly stand by what's in it, and you can just go watch that if you want to hear me talk about that for, like, what was it, 20 minutes? Or, excuse me, 19 minutes and 50-some seconds. I have a few favorite scenes from this movie. Probably the most wholly effective scene is Han's death. The build-up, the atmosphere, the flow, the writing, it's probably just the best thing J.J. Abrams has ever directed, and I'd say that as someone who's a big fan of J.J. Abrams as a director. But I talked about it a lot in the other videos, so let's take a look at the end with Rey and Kylo in the Force. Specifically because I'm sure in that video I think I only skimmed over this bit and just focused on her taking the lightsaber, him trying to take the lightsaber. The pencil falls and I lose my train of thought. God only knows what I actually said in that video. Man, I really wish I brought water up here because my throat's filling. Horse? Like, I have a bottle of water over there, but it's been baking in the windowsill all day in plastic and... So, the planet, Starkiller Base, is crumbling. Kylo and Rey are in a saber lock, and he gives the typical join me speech.
Teacher, I could show you the ways of the Force!
And I feel like that kind of indicates that at this point he wasn't trying to kill her, nor does he see her as a serious threat at this point, which is understandable both considering his ego and the fact she's been on the shaky backpedal the whole fight. As they're in the saber lock, the tight close-ups with the As they're in the saber lock, the tight close-ups with the beautiful saturated light of the lightsabers clashing, painting their faces in the shifting red and blue glow. It's one of my favorite images in all these movies. J.J. Abrams and Dan Mendel are both generally really good at using light to emphasize the character's eyes in specific and pivotal moments. When Kylo says, "I can show you the ways of the Force," it snaps Rey into something. The sound fades as she's reaching into it. And this is the point where the tide turns. And not just for this fight, but like the whole trilogy. Controlling the Force in these movies is conveyed as a discipline that must be learned, but merely tapping into it is almost always shown as being instinctual. Mind you, Luke's training in The Empire Strikes Back was all about unlearning what you have learned. He had to open his mind to it first. Rey's use of the Force here is through her opening her mind and letting it fill her emotions, which at this point are anger and hatred towards Kylo. Which, by the way, throughout this whole trilogy, whenever Rey connects to the Force under moments of pressure, she tends to skew towards aggression, and we're really seeing it for the first time here. The slow-mo as Rey takes up most of the frame in her approach to Kylo, him scrambling in the left corner with the camera following slightly behind from Rey. It's a really clever way of keeping us within the heat of the action while also creating a slight disconnect from Rey's perspective. And then you have the slightly angled wides for Kylo's strikes, and then the way the camera moves when they lock hands. It fantastically visually conveys the physical weight of the movements and Kylo's newfound disadvantage. And then the way these shots are put together, it's just so... It's good. And yes, the visual aesthetics of the scene are perfect too. I know I spent a bit here just talking about Rey's character, but it was relevant as I think the way the scene is put together is a strong showcase on how to convey power dynamics and weight in an action scene, so it's relevant. This isn't drink, this is full of bottle caps. Bold of you to assume this movie has a good scene. Bold of you to assume this movie has a good scene. That was a bit. Out of all the movies, The Last Jedi is the hardest for me to pick one scene because it's my favorite and there's like 20 scenes I want to talk about. I know my favorite scene in this movie is the confrontation on Crate, and it's like my favorite live action scene in any movie, and I've seen like 38 movies. Follow my letterbox to see what I've watched and am watching. That's me plugging another one of my social media, so I'm like a really YouTuber now. I'm talking about the crate scene. The bit with Luke and Leia just before is gold too. And then the dude just walks out there. Literally walking out of the shadows through the literal fire and flames to face down the entire First Order. It's Luke standing up to the representations of his folly. It's one man against an army, and the composition frames him as standing equal to the size of the massive machines, and, like, this is my favorite shot in the whole fucking series. The meaning, the composition, the colors, it's perfect. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Perfect and artful visual storytelling is this whole scene, but this one image sums up the conflict of the entire movie so perfectly. This whole bit is great, and then Kylo confronts him, and it just gets better. It's easy to take for granted now because I've seen it so many times, but I'll never forget how amazingly this scene put me on my toes the first time I was watching this movie. The amazing staging and cinematography just continues, and the scene comes to a culmination. Adam Driver is just absolutely going crazy with his performance.
The Resistance is dead. The war is over. And when I kill you, I will have killed the last Jedi!
And then Luke.
Amazing. Every word of what you just said was wrong.
The increasingly tight shots of Luke proclaiming the Jedi are reborn and the war is just beginning, with the remaining resistance literally being illuminated from darkness, and then the final close-up, Luke totally dominating the frame, and with total conviction saying he will...
I will not be the last Jedi.
And then that match cuts to Rey. Amazing visual storytelling, ridiculous performance, beautiful visuals. It's all thematically charged, and it just works, man. I can't ask for more, not just for a Star Wars movie, but any movie. Like, this is as good as it gets, guys. Wrap it up. The final bit with Kylo.
See you around, kid.
Luke has just evolved, man. He wins the day through mastering knowledge of the Force and his opponent, while genuinely apologizing for his failures and showing he sees through Kylo's turmoil.
I'm sorry.
All of it completely passively. It's everything Yoda said a Jedi should be in The Empire Strikes Back.
You will know when you are calm, at peace, passive. A Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense, never for attack.
Luke is gone. I felt it, but it wasn't sadness or pain. It was peace and purpose.
Tying up a dozen callbacks in its own movie, as well as coming back full circle, living up to the expectations set all the way back at the beginning of Luke's training. I'm going on about writing, not filmmaking, I know, but the final bit, the moment of silence with the crackle of Kylo's lightsaber, zooming in on his grip, tightening on it, it tells us everything we need to know about him visually. His theme kicks in harder than ever. He charges and slices through Luke, and the camera tilts downwards, looking at the red surface representing the blood he thinks he spilled, and the score is just going crazy, and Luke is just like, and then the twin sons call back after that. I think I love this movie, man. That's you. The best scene in The Rise of Skywalker is the Force handoff scene, but also the Jedi voices. But those are kind of for the other video I mentioned earlier. I'm trying not to be redundant. It's fine because it gives me an excuse to talk about this scene. The lightsaber duel on the Death Star ruins. It's Rey and Kylo's first physical up-close meeting since the throne room in The Last Jedi. At least not counting the Force connections. Their final Force connection scene in The Last Jedi saw Rey literally closing the door on Kylo. And she doesn't backtrack on that, giving 0 as fuck. I need water. Oh, this is getting a little scratchy. I just went and took a drink of the fucking windowsill water. It tastes like fucking plastic, man. And she doesn't backtrack on that door shut. There's no indulgence given to his predictable spiel, and she immediately goes in for the kill once he deploys the waypoint. Remember what I said about Rey tending towards aggression? The fight is underway, and small note, but I love how Rey jumping down is cut with a headphone falling that leads into the next scene. It's a fun detail. Visually, this fight reflects Obi-Wan and Anakin's fight on Mustafar, where that was a volcanic world, vibrant reds and oranges, and smoke and lava exploding everywhere. The location visually represented the high emotional stakes and Well, I guess every type of stake to be had in a story. It was all at an impasse, only to be resolved by the fateful duel between the two. And here, nearly 60 years later, still fighting over the remains of that same conflict at the hands of the same guy on the ruins of where the war was thought to be ended. Cloudy weather, grayish blue color palettes, the wave splash is just another force to endure. The camera mostly keeps a distance compared to the force fight, and as a whole it's just far less explosive and intense than most lightsaber fights. They move to just showing off their force abilities. Rey stops Kylo's blade with the force, Kylo does the same. The whole thing is not the most spectacular duel in these movies, but therein lies its strength. The point is to show the exhaustion, the repetition of this conflict, both on a character level between Rey and Kylo, but as well as a saga level. Once the stamina runs low, the anger fades, and you just get the sense that neither of them really wants to be there. And Kylo eventually just has Rey beat. And as Kylo is about to take that victory, Leia reaches out to her son one last time, and this shot is just one of my favorites in any of these movies, and the way the dripping water in the back is exaggerated to echo the waves on Kef Bir, it's really cool. And upon feeling hurt, Kylo immediately drops his lightsaber. The unstable crackling blade that he used to kill his father deactivates and follows. The waves quietly thunder in the back with some tasteful slow-mo, and then Rey seizes the opportunity and grabs the weapon to strike down her opponent. These shots look great, the sound mixing and composition of Rey's stab with the saber just cutting through that connection that Kylo has, it's great. Okay, the camera died when I was recording that bit, and this is like fucking 20 minutes later, 30 minutes later, I don't know, I didn't actually check the time. I got water though. I forgot the water bottle. Anyways, what a well done sequence of shots. The way the camera swings into Leia's falling hand with R2 in the back, and then the push in on Rey's face as she has the sickening realization. It's so good. Rey wields Kylo's blade exactly twice in this trilogy. Once when charging in hatred to kill Snoke, and then here again picking up the hatred that slipped from Kylo Ren to destroy him in his moment of vulnerability. I adore this whole sequence. I could talk about the healing, her fleeing, the Han scene, the Luke scene, but I can't be here all day. And that's the Star Wars. And okay, yes, this is also a reshoot. This video is long. I stopped working on it for a few weeks because I didn't like what I had recorded, but letting unfinished projects build up is ridiculous, so here I am. I made this video to be one of 2 final videos about Star Wars, and then I could put that realm of content out of my mind. But honestly, I changed my mind with what I want to do with YouTube daily, and I've had more ideas since then, so there might be 1 or 2 more or something, I don't know. Come back to this video in 5 years. And I might end up doing that second video anyway, but ultimately I'm just happy to have this done and released. I know the whole best directed scenes concept for this video got kind of muddied and forgotten as it went on, but really this video was just an excuse to talk about Star Wars in a completely chill and non-argumentative context, and that's what I did. I forgot about the Clone Wars movie. Fuck. Also, I just put out a new short film, or am about to put one out. I haven't decided if I'm going to release it before or after this video. But when you're watching this, it's probably already out, so you can go watch that. Or don't. I'm not your supervisor. That was really stupid. Thanks for watching. I mean, I can rationalize this. I mean, it's only like 4 episodes of the show stitched together and released theatrically. 4 or 3, I don't know. It was never meant to be a movie. That's what I'll go with.